Hello and welcome to Willing Spirit. Tonight we'll be commenting on the Brett Baier interview with Kamala Harris. This will be the first interview she does with a real, serious journalist. So we're excited to kind of take a look at it and see what she has to say.
Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have.
All right, so I just want to pause right there. So, a couple things. One, Brett Baier is a gentleman. He is a real gentleman. He's actually giving her the opportunity to be honest and transparent and say, yeah, give us a number. What do you think? How many people are here? He gives her the opportunity to give a low number or a high number so we really have an idea of how transparent she wants to be. This is going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. Also, she said it's a topic. It's not quite a topic. It's a crisis that everybody's well aware of. Before, she said the border was secure. Now it's a crisis. It's weird how over the course of the 3 years, 2 years ago, she was adamant about how secure it was, and now it's open into crisis. So one interesting question is, did it become a crisis under her watch, or was it always a crisis?
And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an immigration system.
It's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
So just to not completely gloss over that, he did ask her for a quantitative answer. She pivoted away from that. He's not going to dwell on it. He's like, all right, you're not going to give me a straight answer. Give me a qualitative answer.
Beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
Yes, ma'am. May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish,
You had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising, and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it's a good thing he raised that point. He's highlighting that you had all the branches of government, you brought forward a bill, it didn't go to get voted on, it did not pass, and even in the best case scenario, you weren't able to get the legislation passed. So, just to review, she was in power, they had all the opportunity, they didn't pass the law.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States.
What she's doing is she's really, really highlighting how critical the stay in Mexico plan actually was. Trump said, all right, we're going to address all these people that are seeking political asylum. We get it, it's a problem. You're going to wait in Mexico until your court date arises. You're going to come in, we're going to see your case, and then we're going to send you back, or we're going to let you into the country. What the Biden-Harris administration did, whether you like it or not, they accepted the people into the country, gave them a trial date saying you're going to come back, show up at this time, at this place, and then let them into the country. They just released them into the interior. Now, the thing they wanted was to be in the country. So if you say, all right, why don't you go on into the country, come back to this on this court date to the border, they're going to say, no, I'm already in the country. What am I going to come back for? If I come back to the court date, I'm either going to get to stay or get sent back and deported. But if I just stay in the country and I just keep my head down, I get to stay. So where's the incentive structure actually show up to my court date? I mean, the incentive is you get to stay in the country legally. But if they think for some reason they're going to get deported, they'll just disappear into the interior. So she listed a bunch of stuff that they worked on to fix the migrant problem. And obviously none of it worked. But Trump's Remain in Mexico executive action worked. It's kind of like saying, oh yeah, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, we did these 10 things. How great is this? And it's like, yeah, but all of it was not as effective as this one thing that Trump did. So I don't see this as being a feather in her hat that she got. She listed a bunch of things that didn't work.
States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions.
What a hypocrite. She's saying Trump would rather run on a problem than fix it. There was a problem. The problem existed under Trump. Took steps to fix it. It was getting better. They come in, they make the problem significantly worse, and then they say, oh, we're going to fix it. Well, why don't you just do the thing? I get you tried something different. It didn't work. Go back to what Trump did, and then you can improve on where he was, and you can make it better now with the new knowledge that what you tried didn't work. So it seems like whatever they're doing, they either did on purpose or they did accidental.
And they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you,
but actually is focused on fixing it.
6 Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in
That's kind of a ridiculous statement, because you can also say that if you just didn't do the executive orders that undid Trump's Remain in Mexico plan, these wouldn't happen. So it's kind of weird how she's kind of doing an about face where she's saying, oh, well, if they did what we wanted, those murders wouldn't have happened. It's like, yeah, but if you didn't do the thing you did, those murders wouldn't have happened. So I don't know. She seems to be making a poor argument here.
20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early.
Oh, that's really sad to listen to. I feel so bad for that woman that she had to lose her child due to, really for no reason. Just somebody wanted to change the demographics of the voting bloc, let in a bunch of illegal immigrants. Some of them turn out to be really bad criminals, murdering citizens of the U.S. It's really bad stuff. Let's see how the Vice President Harris reacts to it, and if she takes responsibility.
Early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss.
Oh, all right. There's a famous compassion we've been hearing about. Empathy. Great.
Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions.
You've got to be kidding me. You're pivoting to Trump that quickly? You can't show a little compassion, a little empathy for somebody who is pouring out their heart at a congressional hearing saying that they lost their daughter? They lost their daughter for something that didn't even have to happen. This is one of the few instances where there's a crisis and you can really put your finger on exactly who caused it. That's terrible.
Let's talk about that as well. Brett.
And then she doesn't even want to talk about it or address it. She just wants to pivot right to Trump and blame him as if he's the one that undid the executive orders. This is ridiculous.
In all fairness, I told you I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist. They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that that's going to get fixed, Brett.
Well,
that's how this
Well, she says that they need more resources. She keeps dancing around the idea that she's somehow not. She keeps dancing around the idea that she's responsible for it. Yeah, the border can be more secure before her. It could have been more secure under Trump, but he was working on building the wall and securing the border. Under her leadership as the border czar, the border got more porous. It's fine if it's not perfect, but you should keep working to make it better. Even if it's not perfect, I repeat, you have to make it better. You can't make it worse and then say it's not your fault.
system works.
That's the premise of this question.
But
There were
that's how the
90
system
plus
works.
executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want.
Okay, now you start hearing the inflection in her voice. She went from calm and lower tone into this higher pitched, kind of whiny sounding voice that she normally doesn't go into unless she knows she's kind of caught, right? So now you're gonna see her probably talk a little higher pitch, instead of actually speaking like a normal, regular person. So, I mean, you hear this when your kid didn't do their homework. They say, well, I was gonna do it, but da-da-da. It's like, no, you can't speak that way. You're the vice president. You need to be a strong leader and explain what you did, why you did it. Even if it was a mistake, say why you did it. Say that you learned from it, and you're not gonna do it again. It seems like we're talking to a child here, but this is a vice president of the free world. She currently holds office. It's not like she's trying to be the VP. She is the VP. So, I mean, I'm hoping she sees what she's doing and she kind of course corrects here. But let's see.
Support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock.
There's an inflection again.
I get it.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked.
Check out her body language. Her legs and her hands are crossed to kind of say, nope, I am not open to this interview. This is a bad decision. I immediately regret this decision.
About some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a...
Yeah, that's her way of saying, oh, that was 5 years ago. I was just pandering for votes. I didn't really mean it.
running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I...
That face was the, oh, you caught me face.
Very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are...
Well, she didn't decriminalize border crossings, but she did create an app that facilitates illegal border crossing. And she's flying people into border swing states to vote in the coming election to try to get herself elected. So yeah, she is doing the thing she's saying she's not doing. That's really dishonest. But
Evolutions that you've had.
No, but let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
so she was hard on the cartels when she was Attorney General of California, but she's not hard on the cartels when she's vice president of the country.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow
Okay, so this is a legitimate concern.
the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report.
So Bret Baier is asking her about her position on something, and now she's talking about Trump. I'm really not sure why she's bringing up Trump. It doesn't really matter what Trump did because Bret Baier is not asking her about Trump. She's saying, do you think that taxpayers should be paying for sex changes of illegals in prison? Honestly, I can't believe that's even a question. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this whole trans movement didn't exist and it wouldn't be a question at all. But apparently, I guess in the world we're living in, men get to come here illegally, get sent to prison, get to go to a women's prison, and then sexually assault women, biological women, in a prison. And they're already in prison, so what are you going to do, right? This is a very, very, very weird situation, and this doesn't happen in other countries. And she's making it sound like Trump was an advocate for transing people in prison. That's just, it's so absurd, and it's weird how gleeful she is that she gets to bring it up. Like, this is a fact that she memorized. She doesn't know how many illegal immigrants penetrated the border, but she knows how much her opponent spent on an ad campaign. It's like, come on, get your priorities straight.
That under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aide said.
So she's making it sound like Trump advocated for sex changes for prisoners. That's a ridiculous thing to say.
That he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassessment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that
bothers me. So let me get this straight. When Bret Baier asked you how many illegals crossed the porous border, that it's your fault it's porous. You have no idea. You're bad with numbers. But when Bret plays an attack ad against you, suddenly you know off the top of your head how much your opponent paid for that ad to air. It's like, obviously she knows how many people cross the border illegally. She doesn't want to say it. So either she's really smart or really dumb. I don't think she's really dumb. I think she just pretends really dumb, and it just looks bad. It looks bad on her.
As it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though.
They say
on plans for the American people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of.
Okay, here we go. She's starting to talk about her plans. She's talking about the results. Hopefully she'll give some supporting information on how she plans to getting those results.
America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you think more?
Wait, so she said that her plan will be better for the economy. Trump's plan would be worse for the economy, even though Trump's economy didn't have inflation and nearly as badly as this Bidenomics situation that we're in right now. So she's saying, well, the experts say this. The experts that I pay to say these things say that my plan is better. Well, if your plan's better and you're the current vice president, then the economy we're in now should be reflective of your plan. Because your first day was 3 years ago. So if your plan's great, we should be feeling the effects, or at least start seeing the early stages of the effects. America's not really seeing it, so I don't know. She's saying how great the plan will be. Hopefully she'll go into some detail of what she's going to do, what the problem is, and what she's going to do to fix the current situation. I mean, that is what a plan is, so hopefully she'll go into it a little bit.
People say they trust him on the economy than they trust you.
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump, people are ready.
Okay, so we're halfway through the interview. She keeps telling us how good her plan is. That's great. I'm very happy with a good plan. You need a good plan to be successful. And I mean, hopefully she'll get into some of the details about what the plan is, or how we can see it. Or, I mean, she talked about the plan so much, I'm excited to know about it. Let's go.
To chart a new way forward. And they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said.
Well, I just heard a bit of a plan, but that was his plan. His plan is to cut taxes. Her plan, what was that? Oh, no. Oh, she didn't say what her plan is yet? Okay. But it's really good? All right. I'm being told that her plan is really, really good, and she's going to tell us what it is. Hopefully she tells us what it is. I can't wait.
Turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden.
Okay, so she keeps saying she's not Joe Biden, she's not Donald Trump. What would she do differently? She's been saying she wouldn't do anything differently. which it kind of goes to what Vivek Ramaswamy often says, where what we're looking at isn't so much a problem of Republican versus Democrat. What we're seeing is a machine, which is the establishment. You have the deep state. There's a system, and there's some candidates that are fighting against the system. So whether or not it's Joe Biden or whether or not it's Kamala Harris, there's a machine, and the person is interchangeable. Biden can leave, Kamala Harris can step in, and she wouldn't really change anything. Nothing would change. So how the economy is now, is under a Kamala regime, would probably stay exactly the same. She probably wouldn't change much. She's just the puppet of the system, of the machine. So that's what Vivek Ramaswamy says. I happen to agree with him. I don't see any flaw in his logic. It seems like there's just a machine, whether it's George W. Bush, whether it's Bill Clinton, whether it's Obama, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's Kamala Harris. They all seem to be saying and doing the exact same things, regardless of political affiliation. The only person that was hard on other countries for trade was actually Donald Trump. The only person that didn't start any wars was President Donald Trump. So there seems to be a trend with all the presidents except for Donald Trump. He seems to be the outlier, and he's also the person mainstream media hates. It's almost as if the system runs the mainstream media, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like...
Okay, here we go. She's distancing herself from Joe Biden, saying she's not part of the machine. That's fantastic. Hopefully she goes into a little bit of detail about what she would do differently. And maybe we have a candidate with her own opinions, her own stances, somebody who wants to take the country forward. That's fantastic.
Every new president that comes in to office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership.
Okay, she went vague, and I'm sure she'll get specific very soon.
For example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business.
So she's saying that Republicans were on stage with her minutes ago. That's great. That sounds bipartisan until you find out that the Republicans that were with her were actually Liz Cheney, who is the daughter of Dick Cheney, who is literally Darth Vader himself. The most evil person in politics that you could align yourself with, you did. Dick Cheney was literally responsible for the whole Iraq War, which is notorious for being a horrible war that we shouldn't have got involved with. And now you're trying to distance yourself from Joe Biden. I'm imagining probably the biggest regret Joe Biden has, and you have, is the Ukraine war and how poorly it was managed. So there's you, who is in an administration that let the Ukraine war go on for far longer than it should have. Somebody from the administration should have reached out to Putin and said, all right, let's get a peace deal going to end this war in Ukraine. That didn't happen. And the person that you're clinging on to for legitimacy, that you're bipartisan, is Dick Cheney and his daughter. That's a horrible person to... That should be political suicide. In any world where mainstream media is being honest, that should be political suicide. She shouldn't even want to be in the same room as Dick Cheney. What she is saying is pretty much... Let's paint a picture here. Imagine in 20 years from now, somebody says, oh yeah, I'm friends with a lot of famous people. I used to hang out with all these people, especially Jeffrey Epstein. It's like, what? What did you just say? Imagine if Jeffrey Epstein is a good guy in 20 years. That's a horrible, ridiculous thing. Dick Cheney is that guy. Dick Cheney is the bad guy that everybody knew was a bad guy 20 years ago. Now, Liz Cheney is supposed to be some arbiter of reasonable Republican mentality? Absolutely not. All right. I digress. Let's get back to the video.
Sector and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5.
Also, it's kind of weird that all these great ideas are springing up when she's running for president. She didn't have any of these great ideas for the last 3 years. And her $6,000 for a child tax credit, she didn't bring that up until Trump said, yeah, let's have a $5,000 tax credit for each kid. So it seems to be that she's like, he said something that's popular, no tax on tips, child tax credits. I can say that too. Let's do it. It's like, yeah, but you're in office. You could have done this for the last 3 years and you just didn't.
Years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric.
Okay, so this was interesting. She is running as a change candidate. She is running as a change agent. She is saying she's going to bring forward fresh ideas, new ideas. Things are going to be great. But when she says, all right, what are you going to do differently? She doesn't have a lot. It's all platitudes, and she doesn't really have any real solutions or answers, it seems like. I mean, and then she pivots to Trump again. I mean, really, her team should be telling her, don't talk about Trump. He's not in office. You're running against him. But try to focus on the things that you can do to make people's lives better. You didn't do it in your office. It's too late. It would have been good if you did something good in office, but you didn't. So don't talk about your record because you don't really have a good one. But you can say what you're going to do. It's not too late. We can make a plan, write down your plan, and then you can pitch it to the voters to get you elected. And then it'd be really great if you did your plan. But don't get ahead of yourself. First you got to write it down. First, you got to make a plan, write it down, know your plan, learn your plan, memorize your plan even. And then when somebody asks you, hey, what's your plan? You can say, oh, this is my plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. That sounds great, right? Right. It's not too late. Maybe she'll give us more details.
And an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track.
She says people are exhausted, but she's the one that keeps talking about Trump. It's like, Madam Vice President, you are the current Vice President. You have, Joe Biden has bestowed upon you all the powers of the presidency. You can do everything in your power to fix the problem at the border and the economy. You can do tariffs. You can lower taxes. There's a bunch of gears and levers in the government you can move around and help out the people. But instead, you're kind of blaming everything on Trump. I mean, it's it makes her look weak. It's not a good strategy, and her team's got to give her some better advice that this is not the well to go back to every single answer. It just makes her look weak.
They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
Okay, all right. So people have expressed their opinion that they're not happy with the road that she's taking them down. And this would probably be a good spot for her to say, that was the Biden administration. I'm his vice president, and I was supporting his policies. That would be a legitimate thing to say. She can legitimately say, he outranks me. We did what he wanted to do. I have different opinions. These are my opinions. These are my plans, my actions, my details. This is how I'm going to make the country better. Let's go. Let's go do it together. So, I mean, hopefully, he's setting her up perfectly for her to say, yeah, that was 3 years of Joe Biden's administration. My new administration is going to look a little different. Here it is. So hopefully she does that.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You
You're
and I
kidding
both
me.
know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you?
You're kidding me. He gave her a layup. He positioned her in such a good spot to say, okay, yeah, I already said what she should have said, but she went right back to Trump. Nobody wants to hear about Trump in this interview. This interview is about you, Kamala Harris, vice president, with all the powers bestowed upon you of the executive branch. And you keep talking about the last guy. I would hate to be dating a girl that she kept complaining about her last boyfriend. That would be such a turnoff. That would be horrible. That'd be terrible. That'd be like, all right, I'm never going out on a date with you again. This is what she's doing. All she's doing is complaining about the last guy. We don't want to hear about the last guy. We want to hear about what you're going to do in your next presidency if you get elected. That's what you're doing now. You're interviewing for a future job. Imagine you go to a job interview and you spend the entire time complaining about your old boss. The person you're interviewing in front of is like, wow, you got a lot of grievances against your last boss. Maybe I don't want to hire you. I keep asking you what you're going to do for this organization, and you keep crapping on the old organization. That's a horrible look. She should stop talking about Trump. She should talk about what she's going to do.
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and
Demeaning and personal grievances? Lady, you keep talking about Trump. You're the one bringing up personal grievances. That's all you've done so far. You need to just forget Trump, work on your message. You should have a strong message to the people. And this is a great opportunity, actually, because now you're on Fox. You're talking to conservatives. You're talking to people that are probably Republican, and you're sitting in a chair talking to Republicans that are very likely going to vote for Trump, and you can convince them to vote for you. These people are tuning in because they either everything they hear about you is through the lens of Fox, or they just want to watch something and dunk on you. This is a great opportunity to show them that you're smart, you know what you're talking about, and you have a good plan that is well thought out. You should be showing off your plan, explaining your vision, go into details about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. This is a perfect opportunity for you. And you're kind of blowing it. We're 18 minutes into this interview, and you haven't told us a single action item that you're going to do. Come on, pull it together. I'm rooting for her. Hey, this is our vice president. I'm rooting for her in the sense that I want the country to do well. I'm praying for her. I'm praying for the country. So hopefully she turns this around. Hopefully she says all these great things that are going to happen if she becomes president because of the things she's going to do that she hasn't tried yet, because the last guy was Joe Biden. I mean, and the next person is her. So let's see what she says.
It being about him
Madam
instead
Vice
of
President,
the American people.
if
People
that's the
are
case,
tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know.
It should not be easy. It should not be a cakewalk. It shouldn't be friendly interviews nonstop. It should be difficult questions. And now you're getting some questions from a real journalist. Hopefully, you have some better ansers.
But
It's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a
So
cakewalk
are they misguided, the
for anyone.
50%?
Listen,
Are they stupid? What
oh
is
God,
it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within.
Again, she's going to Trump. I mean, I get she likes talking about him, but it's really, it's much. It's really much.
An enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today.
Yeah, when she starts talking about the enemy within, talking about the American people, but the enemy within, that's a little rich. I mean, I'm old enough to remember where the Joe Biden administration was talking about parents at school board meetings complaining about the teachers talking about sexual orientation, sexual identity with the children. Obviously, that's grossly inappropriate. I would never want my child approach an elementary school talking about sexual orientation, gay marriage. There's a lot of stuff. I'm not getting into that, but there's a lot of stuff that children are faced with these days from their teachers that should not be topics in the education system at all. So parents have legitimate concerns. They raise it, and then her administration is calling them domestic terrorists. So, I mean, Joe Biden has demonized a lot more people than Trump has, 100%.
Today, Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect,
You got to give it to him. Trump is a very charismatic guy. He can talk about something that is a very serious topic, and he can make light of it. He can talk about how he's being investigated, how the DOJ is being weaponized to put him in prison, and he's right. The current administration weaponized the DOJ to try to put him in prison, and they failed. Well, it's a good thing they failed. I mean, it just looks bad. This is something Putin does. This is something Kim Jong-un does. This is not something that should happen in the U.S., and I'm glad so far the cases have been thrown out saying that they'll resume after the election, or they've been thrown out completely. But yeah, I mean, we really shouldn't be doing this to people while they're running for office of the presidency of the United States. It's like if he did a bunch of really terrible stuff, that should have been looked into before the election cycle. I mean, it really, before it or after it, not literally during it, because when you're doing it literally during the election cycle, it is election interference. It's just a really bad look for the whole country, especially your administration.
That clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you.
That was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree.
I've never heard of Trump talking about locking people up for peaceful protest. That's ridiculous. I remember when people were burning down cities in the riots of 2020. I remember that. The BLM riots, the Antifa riots, where it even became a meme where CNN was saying there's some fiery protests and there was literally cars burning in the background. It's like, yeah, when cars are burning, when people are breaking in and shooting fireworks off into courtrooms, that is not peaceful protest. So, I mean, and Trump was just saying, yeah, you got to arrest those people that are causing violence. Obviously, you got to arrest those people that are causing violence. Yeah, that's what you do. That is the job of the police officers. Somebody's being violent and destroying public property. Yeah, you arrest them. That's reasonable.
Agree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America.
All right, now she's scolding him. This is a really bad look for her. She walked into an interview. He's been really polite, very courteous, not asking any gotcha questions. I mean, these are very legitimate questions he's asking. And she's just going off on him, being visibly upset. Yeah, this isn't going well for her.
Should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes.
Yeah, you can see she just waved somebody off. You could tell she's getting worked up. She's getting angry. She's yelling at Brett Baier. And probably her staff is saying, hey, stop yelling. Stop getting angry. This is a bad look for you. You're not making Trump look bad, yelling and screaming at Brett Baier. You're making yourself look bad. So, yeah.
Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump.
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden.
Yeah, she is kind of looking at him and saying, oh, man, yeah, you caught me. I was talking about Trump having mental problems, being unstable, being mentally diminished. And now you're bringing up that I lied about Joe Biden's condition. Oh, boy.
I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Wait, he has the experience to do what he has done? I think that's what people are upset about. He's not doing the things he should be doing, and he's doing things in accordance to his experience. I mean, she's not helping herself. She's not helping him at all.
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least.
Again, she wants to bring up Donald Trump. It's like, no, you You were lying about the president's mental cognitive decline. And obviously yeah, you're right. Joe Biden is not running for president because of his cognitive decline. You're running for president in his place because there was a steady cognitive decline, which you tried covering up. I mean, I'm glad Brett Baier is not accusing her of covering it up because he is being very professional. He's being very courteous, giving her every benefit of the doubt. So he's doing a great job. I'm very impressed with him.
At least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out, even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President.
It's kind of like she's saying, she's making a statement that is unfounded, and then she's saying a bunch of these other people are saying it too. It's not just me. It's like, oh, you mean people that Trump fired because they did a bad job? You want us to believe people that have personal grudges against him over our own judgment before our own eyes? Obviously, he's not in cognitive decline. Trump hosts these rallies. He talks for over 2 hours at a time, and people are cheering, loving him, and he's without a teleprompter. So he's just off the cuff, talking to the people. Really what he's doing live what comedians do, where they go to a bunch of small comedy clubs, they'll try out a bit, they'll get reactions, they'll say, okay, that was a good bit, I'm going to do that again, I'm going to have that in my special. Ooh, that bit bombed, I'm not going to do that anymore. And Trump is actually getting an accurate understanding of the population. He's getting a pulse on the country by going around having these massive rallies. A lot of these politicians, these career politicians, will pay big money for these polls. Trump's going out and doing the polls in person himself at the rallies, and he knows exactly what the people want because he knows what they're cheering for. They get super stoked when he talks about building a wall or locking her up. I mean, he says things that are semantics, but he knows what gets people excited. She has no idea what gets people excited. I mean, she'll have a Megan Thee Stallion concert. People will show up for it. And then after the Megan Thee Stallion concert, they leave when she gets on the stage. She needs to focus on her messaging and clearly communicate what she's going to do to make people's lives better and how she's going to do it. I mean, it really doesn't, she's not doing herself any favors right now.
Two more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that.
Yeah, that's really surprising she would say Iran, since when Trump was in president, he froze funds going to Iran, and he scared all of his adversaries by saying, yeah, if you do anything out of line, I'm going to hit you. There was a story of when he was having a conversation with Putin. Putin was actually talking about going into Ukraine. And Trump was like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. If you enter Ukraine, I'm going to hit you I'm going to attack Moscow. And he was like, oh, you wouldn't do that. And he was like, oh, I might. Putin walked away thinking, well, he's not going to hit me. Well, he might. And that little bit, that might, was just enough for Putin to say, yeah, it's not worth it. Because Putin knows that if Russia were to go against the US in a direct war, the US would obliterate Russia. It wouldn't even be a competition. It might not be a quick war, but it would be a long, costly war to Russia's detriment on Russian soil. And that's something that Putin might not see the end of. So Putin didn't want to go to war. Now, under Biden and Kamala Harris, Putin had no problem because, and this is Putin's words, Joe Biden is very predictable. He's a very predictable politician. So is Kamala. Kamala is a predictable politician. Putin can enter Ukraine without any worry. He took Crimea under Obama, he did nothing under Trump, and he invaded Ukraine under Joe Biden. So there's no reason to believe he wouldn't do the same thing under Kamala as he did under Joe Biden. There's really no reason for him to think anything otherwise. But I can't believe she said Iran. I can't believe she said Iran. China is a much larger threat geopolitically. China threatens Taiwan. China is the leader of the BRICS movement to replace the US as the global currency. Right now, the US is a global currency for oil. If BRICS is successful in moving US dollars away from OPEC, then the US loses a significant amount of control in the oil trade, and that would result in a huge blow to the US. Imagine the US has $33 trillion or more in debt right now. Imagine if that all gets transferred over to another foreign currency. If we get pegged against another currency and that other currency does very, very well, that'll devalue the currency of the US dollar, and our $33 trillion could balloon up to $40 trillion without us printing money or doing anything reckless. They could blow up our debt and our country could legitimately go bankrupt. The only thing really stabilizing the US dollar is the trust that the US will pay it back, also the US military. Without the trust that the US is going to pay it back, the US debt is a huge, huge national security concern. So, yeah, China is a big deal right now, and I can't even believe that it didn't even come up in the answer. It's almost like you have to live in a bubble, live in a world where China doesn't even exist to have Iran be number one. That's absurd. Not to mention, Iran poses a threat because of the terrorism that they're funding in the Middle East, and they're funding that terrorism with money that was unfrozen from the Biden administration. So if you didn't unfreeze their funds, they wouldn't be funding Hamas and Hezbollah, which would be attacking Israel. So aside from whatever side you may be on, it's a fact that the war that's happening right now in the Middle East between Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah, that war wouldn't be happening if those funds weren't unfrozen by the Biden administration. So just speaking from a world peace perspective, Biden really messed up that situation by unfreezing those funds. So yeah, it's really weird that they went into saying Iran is the biggest adversary, even though they helped unfreeze the funds, making them an active adversary. Instead of, oh, an adversary we don't like that we're just not thinking about, they made them an active adversary in the world stage. And she's not even, I don't know, she's not even showing any sign that she regrets anything they did. It's almost, she's acting like she doesn't know what she did. Yeah. Again, not looking good.
But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the #1 threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, in the several hours on each occasion that Iran posed a threat to Israel, I was there.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. He actually said you're not acting like they're our adversary. Because somebody's your adversary, you don't unfreeze their funds. You don't take the sanctions off of them. It's Trump had sanctions on Iran. The Biden administration moves in, removes those sanctions. It's almost like they're a friend of yours, and you're like, oh yeah, you got put in the corner. Let me help you out by taking those sanctions off you. And then they go and do these bad things. It's like, yeah, if you didn't take the sanctions off, they wouldn't be doing these. Appears, if you judge somebody by their actions, not their rhetoric, it seems like the Biden administration is aligned with Iran. It seems that way. I'm not saying they are. Just based on their actions, that's what it looks like.
Most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies were getting
and
funded
my
by
commitment
Iran.
to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put.
But here are the
Again, talking about Trump. Listen, nobody wants to talk about Trump right now. Iran did not do any major actions under Trump. They did under you. Why is that? And yeah, so you can tell from this from the screen, Brett Baier is going to start talking about the oil production under Trump. Well, Biden's first year is 37, so you see how it was trending under Trump. It was 37, then it went up to 54, 53, and 51. So obviously, Iran made a ton of money from Joe Biden being president.
Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's
that
administration
go towards
that
the Iran regime.
That we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches. Not to mention how Donald Trump has
all of this money
has treated.
What she's saying may be true. I don't know. Let's just say she's being honest about it. She's doing a look over there. She's talking about Trump again. And what Brett Baier is saying is there were sanctions. They were selling significantly less oil. And that newfound funds is funding terrorism. If you didn't lift the sanctions, a lot of the funding for Hezbollah and Hamas wouldn't be happening.
And talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas
has diminished
and
the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
She wants to just talk about Trump. She doesn't want to be held to what her and Joe Biden did. Again, she can just throw Joe Biden under the bus and be like, yeah, it was all his idea. Which she does do by when she says, I'm not Joe Biden. She throws him under the bus. You already did it. Just keep going with that line.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran.
So it would be good to clarify if she would be pro or anti-sanction. That would be an example of an action she would take to support a plan, to support a vision. She's not talking about whether she's going to put sanctions back on or not. She can say, Joe Biden lifted the sanctions. I disagree with it, but he was the president, and I respected his, it's his decision ultimately. Under my leadership, we're going to put the sanctions back on. If she said that, that would answer his question. And honestly, I don't know what her opinion is. I'm listening to what she's saying. The first thing she does is she starts talking about Trump. It's like, hey, what's your opinion? I'm interviewing you. I would love to know your opinion. I'm watching this, looking for her opinion. I'm not seeing it. I would suspect that after seeing how history's played out, she understands, okay, sanctions work, we're going to go put those back on. But if you look at her in her current position, it doesn't seem like she's pushing for sanctions. She hasn't talked about sanctions. It doesn't seem like something she wants to do just because she's not talking about it. So she really should talk about it and say, yeah, I'm going to put sanctions on. And if this was 20 minutes ago in the interview, I would say, oh, great, now she's going to talk about the sanctions she's going to put on. But judging on the last 20 minutes, I don't think she's actually going to say that she would do that. I mean, this has been a poor performance for her. From her perspective, this has been a poor performance.
I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a decision
and there are critics
that they feel.
who look at what the administration did.
Oh, she just said there's going to be a sharp contrast. So she's going to say she's going to put sanctions?
And say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more to say.
There are a lot of
actually.
things that people want to learn about you and your policies,
Yes.
and that's why we invited
I invite
you
everyone
here.
to go to kamalaharris.com, and you will see that I have.
Oh, you're kidding me. No, Brett, what Brett Baier was saying was this was a half-hour interview. You had an opportunity to explain your plan. You had an opportunity to reach out to the public, to look voters right in the eye and say, this is what I want to do, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. Instead, she spent the whole time talking about Trump. I really wish she communicated her plan better. I really wish, instead of telling people to go somewhere and look at her plan somewhere else, she communicated her plan better. This was a good opportunity for her, and I think she just blew it.
80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And
I'm sorry, Madam Vice President. I'm sorry. Your average American voter is not going to go to your website. They're not going to go out of their way and read 80 pages to look for what they care about. That doesn't happen. Every politician that has had binders of their plans, nobody reads it, nobody takes it seriously. If you're running for president, you should say, these are the top 3 or top 5 things that are important to me. This is what I'm going to get done on day 1. And her day 1 was 3 years ago. The fact that she is holding office right now with the current state of the current president tells you that whatever she wants to do, she would have done it by now. If she's not doing it in the current climate, she's probably not going to do it once she's president. So, I mean, in this interview, she should have said exactly what she would do about immigration. She should say exactly what she's going to do about Iran. She should say she's going to end the war in Russia, the Russian-Ukraine war. She should say what she's going to do about the Chinese threatening Taiwan. There are so many things she could have said, but
includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do
And that's why
intend
we
to do to
invited you
strengthen
here
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
support America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
And
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
okay. So we just got done watching the Brett Baier interview with Kamala Harris. It was a great interview in terms of Brett Baier did a great job. He asked very important questions. He gave her the platform, the opportunity to address very important topics that are important to a lot of voters, and he did a great job. He gave her the opportunity to have a platform that really every Republican, every conservative is going to be watching this interview with her on Fox. So it's a huge opportunity for her, and she could have taken the opportunity more seriously. It seems like every time she was asked about something, whether it be about illegal immigration, whether it be about the greatest threat to America, whether it be about really anything, she always would pivot back to Donald Trump. It's clear, obviously, okay, she doesn't like Donald Trump. We got that. If you watch this interview and you think she likes Donald Trump, you're not watching the interview, right? That wasn't an interview you were watching. What would have been good is to get a clear and decisive explanation about where she stands on everything, how she's going to make everybody's life better, how she's going to fix inflation, how she's going to fix the situation with China and Taiwan, how she's going to end the war in Ukraine. I would have loved to hear her, when asked about Iran, to say, well, there's a lot of problems around the world. One is China, one is Ukraine war. Let me talk about that. Once I get elected, you hear Trump say he's going to get it done before he takes office. Let me tell you something. I'm going to get it done before the election happens. Whoa! Could you imagine a power play like that for Kamala Harris to say, you know what? I'm going to get it done this week. And then imagine if she actually ends the war in Ukraine. People would be like, oh my goodness, maybe, just maybe, Joe Biden is what was keeping the Ukraine war going. And now Kamala Harris has come with new, fresh ideas, a fresh way of thinking. She ended the war in Ukraine. Hey, maybe she's going to do a bunch of other great stuff for her. Let's elect her. That'd be fantastic. If she picked one crisis, whether it be the immigration crisis or the Ukraine crisis or the war in the Middle East crisis, she has three crises to pick from. If she picked one of them and solved it before the election, that'd be fantastic. It would be fantastic for her. She would get reelected and she would gain a ton of popularity. It would help her put 3 bad years behind her. She can say, that wasn't me, that was Joe Biden. Look at this great thing I did, ending the war in Ukraine. It could be great for her. So really, I'm going off on a tangent, but this interview was an opportunity she should have taken more seriously. She should have seized this opportunity and really taken advantage. Again, I just think Brett Baier did a great job. He's been a very serious journalist for a long time. He has a great track record, and he showed his excellence tonight. This was a really big interview that carried a lot of weight, and a lot of people were tuning in. A lot of non-Kamala fans got to see her speak without a filter. Most Fox News viewers see sound bites a little bit here and there, and they hear whatever either Greg Gutfeld or whoever it may be, Kilmeade, whatever people want the audience to hear. That's what they can present it however the way they want. This was Kamala's opportunity to, in as raw a way as possible, be on Fox and tell Fox audiences what she stands for, what her plans are, her action items. Again, I don't mean to keep going back to this, but that's what she should have done. Anybody interviewing for a job is going to say, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can do for the organization. This is what I plan on doing. Look at my track record. I mean, yeah, it's a missed opportunity. But either way, Brett Baier did a great job. It was a very interesting interview. It had some really good moments. I hope you enjoyed the content and the context I provided. Please like and subscribe the video. And please participate in the comment section down below. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.